What is going on, everybody? How are you all doing today? Hope you guys are doing fantastic as always. Thanks for tuning in to another video on the Simply Car Things YouTube channel. I really appreciate the support. Before we get into today's video, if you guys are enjoying the content that you see, make sure to smash that thumbs up button as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel down below, and make sure to hit that bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post a new video. I post tons of entertaining and informative automotive content. Really do appreciate the support. Let's get into the differences between the BMW M235i, as you can see right behind me, as well as the BMW M2. Now, we are talking about the OG M2, and when I say OG M2, I'm referring to the M2 with the N55 engine, not the M2 competition. This is the M2 from the model years 2016 to 2018. And while we're on the topic of differences between the M235i and the M2, let's start off with the engine and the powertrain of these cars. Now, it's interesting because a lot of controversy sparks up when talking about the two of these cars because they both share effectively the same power plant, the N55 engine. However, there are some key differences of the N55 in the M2. In fact, the N55 and the M2 is a completely different variant of the N55 than what is found in the M235i. Starting with some of those key differences, the N55 engine in the BMW M2 received the S55 forged pistons. It also received the crank bearings from the S55. It received the S55 Valvetronic system. It also received an additional oil cooler, a larger exhaust manifold, a freer flowing exhaust exclusive to the M2, and it also received the oil supply system out of the S55. And it's pretty much the same unit that's found in the M235i Racing, which has a revised oil pan along with an extra suction pump to combat high lateral and longitudinal G-forces when you're on a racetrack, to prevent oil starvation and help lubricate the engine. Now, what do all these hardware differences amount to? Well, the M2 gets a power bump of about 365 horsepower in comparison to 332 horsepower with the M235i, and a torque bump of 369 pound-feet of torque versus 332 pound-feet on the M235i. Now, this is relatively modest on paper, but I can definitely tell you, after thoroughly driving a BMW M2 and really getting to experience that car hands-on, you definitely feel the increased power. It feels very solid, and all those hardware modifications that were put into the M2 aid in the durability of the N55 and help to keep the engine running optimally in a high-performance context. And while we're on the topic of the engines in these cars, you really can't have a proper running engine without a transmission, right? So we should talk about the transmission differences in the M2. Now, the M235i comes standard with a 6-speed manual transmission, or you can option it with a ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox, which is a torque converter unit. Now, the M2 also came standard with a 6-speed manual transmission, but if you wanted to, you could option it with the M double clutch transmission. Now, this is a dual clutch transmission. I believe it's the same unit that's borrowed out of like the M3 and the M4, and it shifts very, very hard and very, very fast. I mean, we're talking instantaneous downshifts, very good driver engagement with the overall feeling of engaging upshifts and downshifts, and a very, very responsive and highly acclaimed transmission. Now, the ZF8 in these cars also has been acclaimed quite a bit for being ultra responsive for a torque converter gearbox, but truly it doesn't match the preciseness and overall feel of engagement that the dual clutch gearbox has. Now, given the fact that the M2 is a full-fledged M car, we know that an M car is not just about straight line speed. It's about suspension, it's about a good driving experience, being able to take turns at a fast rate of speed. So what did BMW do differently in comparison to the M235? So we know that the M235 and the North American market comes standard with the EDC, which are the electronically adjustable dampers that this car has. And while it does provide a good degree of adjustability, it really doesn't do a whole lot for proper performance. And that's where the M2 really picks things up and changes that. To start, the BMW M2 actually gets the front and rear subframes off the M4, and the rear subframe is actually bolted directly to the chassis of the car. There aren't any rubber bushings that are used, which increases the overall rigidity and stiffness. On top of that, the M2 also does not come with adaptive dampers. It comes with a standard fixed damper setup. The ride height has been lowered, and it also rides on stiffer springs. On top of that, the track itself has actually been widened by nearly 2.5 inches in comparison to the M235i. And between the strut towers of the M2, there's also beefier bracing that's used rather than the M235i. Now, all of this accounts for a much sharper handling car, a much more responsive handling car. Now, in order to put the power down, we know that the BMW M235i does not come standard with a limited slip differential, and it can be optioned via the M Performance parts catalog. But as standard, this car comes with an electronic open differential. And for many, it's a complaint on the car because with the amount of power that these cars can put down and just with the overall performance nature of an M Performance vehicle, I personally believe this car should come with a limited slip diff, but it does not. And that's again where the M2 picks up and somewhat shows off its superiority in comparison to the 235. Now, the M2 uses a electronic multi-plate limited slip differential that can actually send up to 100% of the power to either rear wheel, and it actually distributes power based off of a number of different inputs like steering lock, the amount of throttle input that you're giving into the accelerator, the amount of braking force, as well as the yaw of the vehicle itself. And of course, this is going to enable a much more efficient use of power distribution and the way that the power is being put down to the ground, the way that you can exit corners rapidly, the way that you can launch the car. Overall, of course, this is going to make a big difference. And with all this power, all this suspension tech, all this stuff wrapped up, we can't forget about the brakes. Now, it's interesting because the brakes on the M235i come standard with the 4-piston calipers in the front and the 2-piston calipers in the rear. They're actually Brembo units. The M2 takes things up a slight notch with the same exact calipers, and the brake hubs on the M2 are made of aluminum for a lighter weight. And finally, we can't forget about the overall looks between the M2 and the M235i. If you put an M235i and a BMW M2 side by side, you'll notice the differences immediately. The M2 has a significantly wider and lower stance overall. Now, it's interesting because in terms of body panels, the M235i and the M2 actually share the same side skirts, they share the same roof, they share the same doors, the same trunk, and the same hood. The only differences are the front and rear fenders on the M2 as well as the front and rear bumper. But these different body components make a large difference. The wider wheel arches can accommodate larger wheels and a larger set of tires. The wider stance and the wider track overall, of course, helps with overall stability and handling. And the front bumper and rear diffuser were actually designed to increase the amount of airflow going through the car while also reducing drag and reducing lift while at high speeds. So overall, there are some aero differences between the two cars, but again, a lot of this is visual, and in terms of like wheel and tire specifications, that's where you're gonna see the biggest visual differences with those wider fenders. Now, overall, does this amount to a significantly different car? In my opinion, yes, it does. If you're somebody that likes to track your car, high performance driving events, canyon runs, and things of that nature, you'll definitely notice those differences without a doubt. If you're somebody that just likes to build a car that's good for straight line speed, if you like doing highway rolls and things of that nature, well, you won't feel the differences or really get to experience what the full M2 is capable of in that sense, because the M235i can be made just as quick, if not way faster than a standard M2. And an M240 with a B58 will blow an M2 out of the water with some basic bolt-ons and tuning. The M2 encompasses a much more holistic, well-rounded package in terms of a driver-focused performance sports car. Overall, both are great cars, and you really can't go wrong with either one. To be honest, now with depreciation and used market values, these cars are becoming a major bargain and solid value in the used sports car segment. And as I keep stating, they're awesome. They're really, really fun. With all that being said, if you found this video enjoyable and informative, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to smash that thumbs up button and subscribe if you are new here. Be sure to check out some of the other videos on my channel. I think you'll definitely like a lot of the content that I post on here. And with all that being said, I'll catch you all in the next one. Take it easy.